when I talk to my son on the phone, while he's there, I think maybe she could talk to him once a week. She said, when I talk to him on the phone, all he wants to talk about is the writing class and his writing. And she paused for a second and she said, I feel like I almost have my son back.
School is in, but are you really ready to learn? Open your eyes to a new day in education with The Awakening Educator, a program specifically designed to explore a new, mindful way of educating our youth. Learn about social-emotional learning, new modalities of teaching, and the most relevant topics in education with your hosts, Susan Andrian and Megan Sweet. Susan and Megan will take you inside the issues by looking at them from different points of view, from policies and research to teaching models that are actually used in schools. There's never a dull moment in this classroom. Have any questions you'd like to ask? Maybe you have knowledge you'd like to share, and share your thoughts live on air. Grab a pen and paper and get ready to open your textbooks and minds to a new way of learning on The Awakening Educator.
Welcome to The Awakening Educator. I'm Susan Andrian.
And I'm Megan Sweet.
And today we're very excited to have Marlin Barton. He is a writing educator working with young people in juvenile justice system. And Marlin, if you would like to introduce yourself to our audience, that'd be great.
Yes, I teach juvenile offenders here in Alabama in a program called Writing Our Stories, which is a partnership program between the Alabama Writers Forum, who I work for, and the Alabama Department of Youth Services, which oversees the incarceration of juvenile offenders in Alabama. I just finished up my 24th year today. This was our last class for the year. And it's been a great job for a long time now. It never gets old. I feel really privileged to do this work. It's hard to believe I've been doing it this long, but it's been a great experience. I also do some teaching at Converse College. I teach in their Master of Fine Arts Creative Writing program. I teach fiction there. I'm actually a fiction writer. I've published, I guess, 3 books of short stories, a couple of novels, and I have a new novel forthcoming this fall. So I feel like I'm really lucky. I get to write and publish, and I make my living teaching creative writing. And I haven't had to grade a freshman essay in a very, very long time.
Yeah, grading's no joke, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, welcome, Marlin, to the show. And I guess I'm wondering how this program began. So there are various programs that are provided in prisons and juvenile justice systems, across the country. But I'm wondering how this one in Alabama got started. Could you tell us about that?
A great story, actually. The Alabama Writers Forum was begun a little over 25 years ago now. The executive director is a poet named Jeannie Thompson. So the forum had been in existence for a couple of years. And one Christmas Eve, about 25 years ago, Jeannie went out to the Mount Meigs juvenile facility, which is right outside of Montgomery, Alabama. And she went with a friend who was a state legislator. And they went and took snacks and drinks. And they just went to see the boys out there and to try to bring them a little cheer for Christmas Eve. And because Jeannie's a poet, she got to talking to some of the boys about writing. And she said they were really enthusiastic. A lot of them wrote poetry. A lot of them wrote lyrics. And she said, would you guys be interested in a creative writing class? And they all said yes. So Jeannie went to the then executive director of the Department of Youth Services, a man named James Dupree, and broached the subject with him, and he was all for it. And he was a great champion of the program. We started originally with one class at the Mount Meigs facility, and it slowly grew. We ended up the next year going into Chalkville, which is a girls' facility in Birmingham. And then the following year, we went into another boys' facility in Birmingham called VACA. So we were in 3 different locations. Uh, After a couple of years, Jeannie was able to, I guess you'd say, promote me to assistant director of the program, of the Writing Our Stories program. And also, I continued teaching at Mount Meigs. And then a number of years ago now, a tornado hit Chalkville, the girls' facility, and just tore it to pieces. And at that, and luckily, no one was hurt, but they had to shut the facility down. So the young women there were moved to smaller facilities. So at this point, 24 years in, we're just in the 2 boys facilities. But that's how it started with Jeannie going out there on Christmas Eve.
They were never able to go back to the girls' facility?
They had to completely shut down the facility. The buildings were completely destroyed, and so the young women are at various smaller facilities, kind of scattered around the state, and so we haven't been able to serve the young women directly the way that we were. We hope that will change at some point.
That's the
great thing about the
Go ahead, Marlon.
Yeah. The great thing about the Department of Youth Services is they fund this whole program completely. The Writers Forum does not have to go out and apply for grants and things of that nature. The Department of Youth Services has always believed in this program. Since Mr. Dupree was there, we've had Walter Wood as executive director and now Stephen Lafreniere. And they fund this whole program, and there's enough funding, so that each year we get to publish really nice looking anthologies of the student work, and the students can hold their printed work in their hand in a really nice looking book and really have something to be proud of. So we can't thank the Department of Youth Services enough for what they do.
And it's really cool that it just started out of kind of a natural interest by one person, and actually listening to the youth and hearing what they were interested in, and then responding, which is, I think, always the best way to go. Often we don't actually listen to the folks that we're serving. We just assume we know what they need. What drew you to doing this work?
Well, I'll tell you, I guess not too long. I guess it was in the spring after Jeannie had begun working toward getting the program up and going. I bumped into her in downtown Montgomery. I knew her a little bit, not real well, but we were acquainted. And so we bumped into each other, and she knew I was a writer. I hadn't yet published a book, but she said to me, "I'm trying to get this writing program started at Mount Meigs Juvenile Facility. Would you be interested?" And let me tell you, the second she said that, I thought, yes. I said, I thought that's got to be a fascinating job. I thought, what kind of stories am I going to hear from these boys? It seems to me, when I look at my years there now, that I enjoy teaching writing to all kinds of students. But it seems to me that the boys that I teach, in some ways, they need writing. They need it in such an elemental way. And I think when Jeannie first asked me if I would be interested, I think I kind of intuited that, and I wanted to do that work immediately.
I'd love to hear more about the need. There's a couple of things that are coming up for me. From our team, I'm the mental health side of the house. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm working with young people. Many of which have interacted with the juvenile justice system here in California. And when you talk about the need to be able to write or to tell their story, what have been some of the ways that you've seen this experience of writing, seeing your written work in a beautifully published anthology. How has that transformed some of these young people, and maybe transformed how they see themselves and how they see their story?
I think part of what this program does is to give the students something to be proud of. It happens when I'm in the classroom working with a student one-on-one at the computer. Usually I'll have the students write a handwritten draft first, then they get on the computer and type the poem, and then I work with them and we just go through the poem line by line. And when I can praise a simile that they've used, or an image, or a metaphor, I mean, you should see the looks on their faces. You see the pride that they feel in having done something well, because so many of these boys have been told in so many ways from so many people that they're no good. That that they've gotten into trouble, they're no good, and so here I can sit with them and praise their work and say to them, "This is good. You good." And then each fall, when we publish the anthology of their work and they see their work in print, and we have a publication event where we all go to the chapel, and we have a reading, and we have other students and various people from the world of arts and juvenile justice there. These students get to read and hear applause. And sometimes they end up getting standing ovations.
As you're talking, I'm sort of thinking about the two components of it. So there's the experience of writing and feeling like somebody's seeing your work and appreciating it, and that good feeling you get from, wow, I've accomplished this thing that I didn't think I could accomplish. And that can be very transformative. And that's what I hear you talking a lot about. And then there's the process of moving what's internal, the internal experience in your internal world and whatever traumas these young people have experienced, into a narrative that then is moved from inside to the outside, which can also have a transformative healing process. And I'm curious what that being able to move that story out of the internal world to the written page. How have you supported young people in being able to process the emotional roller coaster that can be?
Sometimes I'll have a student might finish a poem that'll have a dark tone. I mean, these boys have been through some serious things, and their poetry reflects that. And sometimes I'll have students say, Mr. Barton, I keep writing all these really dark poems. And all I can do is tell the student, that's fine. You write what you need to write. You've been through a lot of difficulties in your life, so you're writing about what you need to write about. And I think being able to take all this internal angst, all these internal emotions they have, and to move them move them from the internal to the external I think it helps them. It helps them deal with their life. And sometimes I'll have a student, when we're looking at a poem together, student will say, well, this really happened. And sometimes it's some pretty dramatic stuff. They might write about the death of a friend. I've had students write about friends of theirs who've been shot and killed. And they'll tell me, this really happened. This was my friend. And what I learned to do early on was to never act shocked or surprised, but to take it in stride and to tell the student, I'm sorry you've been through such a terrible thing. I'm sorry about the loss you've been through. I said, but you've really written about it beautifully. I mean, you've really created something here that's affirmative. And they tend to just nod their head. I think they understand.
Yeah, that's interesting to hear, Marlin. That I think what I heard from what you just reflected was you gave space without judgment for the kids to share what was true for them, and often that's not actually how folks do it. we have some level of judgment in there, and you're also giving them the space to get out some of those stories that are inside that might be difficult, and to make that okay and create that space, I think is really, really wonderful. We're already up to our first commercial break. So what I'd like to recommend is that we go on break, and then when we come back, maybe you can read one of the poems from one of the students.
We also have a question from our Facebook audience. So maybe when we come back, we can hear the poem and then.
Are you ready to change the way we do school? Yeah, me too. This is Megan Sweet from The Awakening Educator, and I've designed programming that empowers educators to reimagine how they approach their work. The pandemic has laid bare what most of us already knew. Our schools are under-resourced. Our system is set up to fail our most vulnerable students. Our educators are burned out and overwhelmed, and we all deserve better. With almost 30 years in education and 15 dedicated to leading school reform, I have been there and I get it. I've sat in the same seats that many of you have. I've been a classroom teacher and a school administrator. I've led district, county, and statewide reforms. I've coached dozens of teachers, principals, and executive leaders, and I've partnered with students, parents, and community activists. I have the scars from a lifetime of scrapping out in education, but also the lived experience that change is possible. After facing the prospect of quitting education myself, I began a journey to understand how I could stay in the profession I love, but do it in a way that was sustainable. Here's what I now know. It begins with self-care. Prioritizing ourselves can feel counterintuitive for educators, but when we give without attending to our own needs, eventually we run out of resources and burnout ensues. But when we stop fighting the system and instead look inward for the answers we seek, we live more empowered lives and are better able to create the educational settings where our students will thrive. Here's what I also know. We already have the answers inside of us, we just sometimes need help getting them out. And that's where I come in. I love supporting educators to find their inner voice and match all those school smarts with their innate instincts about what works best for students. My superpowers are listening well, synthesizing ideas, and breaking complex processes into understandable and accessible parts. How will we do it? It all starts with doing what I call self-work, dedicating time and attention to building a relationship with ourselves. We do this in a course I call the Beliefs Lab. By the end of this course, you'll understand why self-care is essential for being an effective educator, and you'll have strategies you can use right now. You will also get a handle on some of those beliefs that are helping you and those that are getting in the way. The next step is doing the school work, leading classroom and school change. In the course I call The Cycle, you will learn a process for realizing goals for yourself and for your educational context simultaneously. You will also have deeper insights and strategies for putting your plans into action. Want more support as you engage in this self-work and schoolwork? I've got you covered. My personalized coaching and consulting services are designed to meet you in your school right where you are and support you to clarify your vision for the future. Want to know even more about what I do? My book is a great place to start. An Educator's Guide for Using Your 3 Eyes details the self-work and schoolwork that I described above and talks about concrete ways that you can start to feel better right now. If you want to learn more about how to work with me in the courses I just described, please come to my website, www.your3eyes.com. That's YOUR, the number 3, EYES.com. I can't wait to support you to realize a better future for yourself and for your school community.
And welcome back. Oh, go ahead, Megan. You can take us in.
Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us today, and thanks for being with us as we talk with Marlin Barton about his work helping students that are in the juvenile justice system to write poetry. So Marlin's agreed to read a few of those poems for us, and so this will be the first one. So I'm really excited to hear it.
All right, this is from a student with the initials TF. Because of confidentiality laws, we can't, use the students' full names. A lot of them are bothered by that. A lot of them are so proud of their work, they would like to see their names below their poems, but we have to use initials. And this is a poem called Where I'm From. I'm from pain and love, from home before the street lights and watching my grandparents struggle for their life. I am from fistfights to gunshots all night. I am from I love you to crying myself to sleep at night. I am from apple cinnamon and bleach. I am from perseverance and heartbreak. I'm from a single parent home, but still knew my father was coming. I am from Birmingham, but inside I was a lonely soul crying for help. I'm from a dark place that lies deep within loss and confusion. I'm from a suicidal mind and a troubled child heart. I am from lockup, staring at a couple of months that changed to juvenile life. I am from football in the streets to basketball in the summer. I'm from spray painted walls to blood puddles in the asphalt. I'm from pain that drives me insane, but no one understands. I'm from sugar cane and marijuana smoke. I'm from hugs and kisses to watching my back. I'm from pain and love.
That's really, really beautiful and profound. There's so much about that poem that I really appreciated and actually needed to hear today. So thank you for reading that, Marlin. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
My favorite line.
This poem, there were so many moments that were poignant for me in listening to the poem. Both my kids have done the I'm from poems during their elementary school, and to be able, I love this way of working with young people because it and grounding them in where they're from both the gifts, and you could really hear that the love in his family, that the line where he said, I'm from a broken home that knows my dad is coming. That line for me really resonated as a very descriptive who his family was, along with some of the other components, but to be able to weave through the joy and the pain of his life in this poem was really powerful. It was really powerful.
The couple of lines that I really like in here, let's see. I'm from a suicidal mind and a troubled child heart. I just thought that was a great original line. I talk to the students a lot about using original language. One thing I want to say here is that this is really, as Jeannie Thompson has often said, the program and the way we teach the students is really craft based. We don't just tell the students to write about their feelings. We give them certain exercises that focus on using simile or using metaphor or using personification. And I often tell the students, try to use original language. You want to say things in a way that no one's ever heard before. And I just thought that was a great line. And I love the line, I'm from sugar cane and marijuana smoke. I'm always preaching to them, use the five senses. Use, taste, touch, sight, smell, and sound. And I thought I did a great job of that all the way through the poem.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you for that. We had the question. I saw it flash on the screen. There it is. Can you read the question there, Marlin?
Yeah, I can read it for you. In therapy and education, we often emphasize the relationship between the clinician, educator, and the client and student as the foundation on which all other intervention is built. Working in, I can't have my glasses on,
carceral settings.
What barriers, carceral settings, so jails and incarceration, what barriers do you see to helping relationships with your students, and how do you work to overcome those barriers?
That's a great question.
This may sound strange, but I don't really feel any barriers in working with my students. They know they're free to write whatever they want to write. I'm in the classroom with a cooperating teacher who's a full-time teacher. It's actually the librarian out at Mount Meigs. Her name is Tamika Hogsett, does a great job. So she's kind of in charge of keeping order. The students come in, they want to be there. The students I teach take my classes voluntarily. No one has forced them. If they force the students to take creative writing, it would never work. So the students are there, they want to be there, and I'm free to work with them in any way that I need to. It's again, all the people at the Department of Youth Services love this program and support it fully. And when I sit down to work with a student one-on-one, he can show me anything he wants to show me. We also have the students write in journals, and I tell the students, no one's going to read your journal, including me. So you're free to write in your journal anything that you want to. So, the only barriers happen when students get pulled from class for counseling sessions and for one thing and another. But that's just part of teaching in a facility
or
like
teaching
that.
anywhere.
That's
I think
really,
having been in the school that those kids getting pulled
constant
for that's not constant disruption. I would say is not unique to incarceral settings.
Yeah, I mean, so it sounds like number one, it sounds like maybe you're a natural fit for it, because I think a lot of folks want to come and support in those environments, but there's barriers that might show up. One might be seeing themselves as so different from their students, which I'm hearing from you maybe naturally isn't something that is a barrier to you. But I think sometimes folks come into even regular teaching spaces and they feel like they are doing the kids a favor in some way.
Yeah.
Or they are in some way better than, or are going to be imparting knowledge in a way that then actually takes away students' own gifts and contributions. So it sounds like you're naturally not doing that, which is great. And you're giving kids choice, both in coming and also in how they choose to contribute, which is also really, really important when we talk to kids, especially in a trauma-informed space. We're in a space like an incarceration. If you're incarcerated, it's as much trauma sensitivity as you can have is going to be important, because folks are there because they're going through something one way or the other.
I mean, I was having that conversation with my students at Holy Names the other evening, where I teach graduate psychology students, and many of them work in forensic psychology, so they work in the justice system with adults or with juveniles. And we were having the conversation about how do you create safety and trauma in the environments that are systemically created not to be barriers to those. So that question that was asked around the system itself has made it very difficult for trauma-informed environments, and many of the adults that are working in those systems are burnt out. They have compassion fatigue. They've sort of been ingrained into the system. So to be able to maintain the relational safety that it requires for someone to be vulnerable to write that poem or to write other poems, which we know require vulnerability and pain, like tapping into our historical pain as well as our historical joy, and being able to tap into that joy in spaces in our justice system. There's not always room for that as either. Right. So it does sound like you've created this beautiful, bubble within this really difficult situation that these young people are in, where they're able to have safety, have vulnerability, tap into those different parts of themselves. And that's what I love about narrative. And that's what I love about poetry and writing and creative writing is we're able to celebrate all of the pieces of who we are and bring them together in kind of creative ways that then tell our story, but not always tell it in the same kind of narrative as this is my life, but I have this new way of talking about what's happening for me, where sometimes words have failed in the past.
Yeah. Do you ever hear back from your students later, Marlin, after they've left? And if you have, what are some of the reflections you hear back from the students once they've gone back into their regular lives again?
Well, we do hear from students occasionally. A couple of years ago, Jeannie Thompson got an email at the Writers Forum from the very first student in the class. He was the first student handpicked when we began the program. The people at the administration at DYS, Department of Youth Services, when they were getting ready for the class to begin, they thought about who would be good students. And so this particular student was their first choice. This would have been in the fall of 1997. And a couple of years ago, we got an email from him saying that he was living, he had his own business, he was married, he had a couple of children, and he was still writing poetry. Which was just fantastic to hear. And he talked about how much the program meant to him when he was at Mount Meigs. Several years ago, I was doing a reading at Jefferson State Community College in Birmingham, and I was reading to one of the, I think it was a sophomore class up there. And after I read, the student came up to me and said, "Mr. Barton, do you remember me?" And it had been one of my students at Mount Meigs. And he just said how much the program had meant to him. And, he was in school there. He said he was making good grades and doing well. So, when we've heard back from students, it's all been positive. And,
as you're talking, it reminds me, I've been in Oakland for a really, really long time providing mental health services. And I had the opportunity to be connecting with with a boy who was the child of a young man that I had worked with many, many, many years ago. And we had a writing poetry program that came to the school. And I was in the hallway and I saw that he had written a poem about his dad. And I was able to take a picture of the poem this little boy had written about his dad and text it to the dad, who hadn't seen the poem. He didn't know his son wrote this poem because his mother was getting the poems or whatever, but he hadn't seen it. And there was this big emotional connection between this young man and his father, who I knew them both in relationship, and their ability to connect with each other in a way that they hadn't connected previously. And I often think about the richness of poetry and the richness of creative writing as these healing spaces and these connecting spaces. In an interview that we had a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about the importance of connections and wondering, how are you helping your young people through through story writing and through poetry? What is the process, and how do you help them make connections with their own past to the story they're trying to write?
Well, I'll tell you, like I said earlier, we teach this in a craft-based way. So I feel like we give the students tools to use to write about whatever they want. And so I never suggest that they write about their experiences, but what happens is they tend to do it naturally. It just comes out, and they do write about their relationships with family members, people in their past, from their past. And occasionally, if a student, well, more than occasionally, it happens quite often actually, if a student writes a poem about his mother or father or a brother or sister, I'll ask the student, would you like to make an extra copy of this and mail it, to your mother or to your father? And they always want to.
They
and
always
so I can do that.
Yeah.
That's
we have another question. So we have, thank you for your comments and important work, Mr. Barton. What are some good writing practices for young people re-entering settings, people coming out of incarcerated spaces, if they want to stay away from like school and community and their families. There's so much healing that needs to be done during the reentry. Do you know of any activities or writing practices that you encourage your students to use when they are leaving incarceration and reentering into community?
Nothing specific comes to mind, but our hope is that by the time the students leave Mount Meigs, my students leave the program, they've had enough experience and they've learned enough about the basics of writing poetry and fiction that they'll continue writing on their own. And one of the things that I do at Mount Meigs is, we do some very specific writing exercises that prompt them to write poems. But what begins to happen is the students will write extra poems completely on their own. And they'll use the skills that they've been learning in these extra poems. And so, I have some students who just write and write and write, and I get tons of poems from them. And I can't help but think, they're taking what they're learning, they're moving forward with it, and they'll continue doing it. Like I say, a lot of the students that we hear back from, years later, have told us they're still writing. And so, I think just the act of writing, once they're released, can do so much for them. We have them keep journals while they're there, and I think I hope that a lot of them will continue writing in journals, because that will help them deal with whatever they're going through. I wanted to tell one quick story talking about connections. A number of years ago, right after one of the readings we had in the fall, this mother came up to me, because we always invite the parents to come. I wish more came, but a lot of times they're working and they can't get away. But we always have some parents there. And this mother came up to me afterward, and she said, when I talk to my son on the phone, while he's there, I think maybe she could talk to him once a week. She said, when I talk to him on the phone, all he wants to talk about is the writing class and his writing. And she paused for a second, and she said, I feel like I almost have my son back. And, that was just a great thing to hear.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Marlin. And I think it speaks to, the power that writing can have in giving us our voices and giving us a space to start to even recognize them. I think whether we're incarcerated or not, we all are somewhat imprisoned by our thoughts and by our experiences, and having a methodology for getting that out and some encouragement to do that, and being able to turn those painful experiences into a beautiful work of art, I think is a really powerful gift. I'm wondering, before we go to our next break, if you could read us another one of the poems that you have.
Be glad to. This one's a little bit shorter. This is called Crescent Moon. Her life is like a crescent moon, never knowing what it's like to be full, always wanting to be noticed, so she breaks rules, never believes she is loved, so makes the streets her family, wishing for forgiveness from everyone, even though they have, doing drugs to numb herself so she doesn't have to fulfill her duty as a mother. What she doesn't know is that when she is herself and with her family, she is a full moon.
Wow, that's a really powerful poem. Really powerful. Thank you.
Yeah, that's powerful. Let's go into break with that, Marlin, and then we come back. Maybe we can talk a little bit more and hear that third poem too. These are really powerful and so beautiful. But we'll take a brief break and we'll be right back.
Hey listeners, are you enjoying this show? And do you want to hear more? Then please subscribe to our show on your favorite streaming platform. Like this show and tell others about us. We're available on Castbox, Deezer, Podcast Addict, Podchaser, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, and Apple Podcasts. So please connect with us there. You also can watch shows live being recorded on our Facebook site, The Awakening Educator. You can connect with us via Instagram or Twitter at The Awakening Educator. And you can also subscribe to our newsletter. We've been busy recording a ton of terrific shows that will be rolling out over the rest of this year. So we would love to be able to have you be a regular member of our community. Thank you so much and have a great, great day. And we're back. Yeah, that poem was still with me a bit. I don't know if we don't want to know any personal information about the student who wrote that story, that poem, but I'm just wondering, as these painful moments show up for students as they're writing, are there a lot of emotional displays in the class? Are there connections with mental health services or supports that they get maybe at other times? I understand they're not happening during your class, but I'm wondering if there are other ways that students are being supported to process these big emotions that are coming out. I mean, I could connect a lot with that poem myself as a mother and as a human. And so I'm just wondering how some of this stuff kind of gets processed for the kids as they're there.
A good question. All of the students have what they call case managers, which are counselors who meet with them, I'm not sure how many times a week, but they all get counseling all the way through their time at Mount Meigs. And I've asked students, I often ask students when they write a particularly poignant poem about their home life or about their experiences, I'll ask the student to show the poem to his case manager. And so I think that gives the case manager or the counselor another tool. And I tell you, I've had the case managers tell me, they said, we can always tell who's in the writing classes without seeing a list, because the students who are in the writing classes are always so much more articulate about their emotions. And I thought that was a great
really
thing
powerful
to hear.
Yeah,
that's beautiful. Yeah, that's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
So we would love to hear another poem.
Yeah, we have time for one more, I think, right?
Yeah, we have room for one more. And actually, while you're reading the poem, I'm going to...
This is called The Paintbrush of Emotions. And I love the way the student, he's describing, the act of painting, but I think really he's talking about the act of writing, but really any kind of creation, any kind of artistic creation. So it's called The Paintbrush of Emotions. The handle of my paintbrush is a mixture of sadness and joy, love and anger. So many emotions to hold together in one piece, too many for only one handle. The brush paints onto the canvas all the emotions of whoever holds the handle, and the brush creates what the holder chooses. The paint spread onto the canvas is the life that we look forward to, whether it be good or bad, or happy or sad. The paint is our picture, the ideas we, the holder, have, but can't quite find our way to. The paintbrush leads the holder to his destiny or destruction. We can choose to hold it or choose not to. It's always available to us, ready for whatever path the holder takes.
Yeah, these are all such profound poems, Marlin. It's really something to hear the thoughts, but it's really amazing to hear just the depth and complexity of emotions that are coming out from the students and how they're able to share those, to kind of paint, forgive my use of their metaphor, paint a picture in that way. And the amazing way that you're really guiding students to create these incredible works of art through their experiences. So that's really, really something wonderful. Before we go to our featured educator, it'd be wonderful for you to tell folks how they can learn more about you and the work that you do. So can you share with anyone, like you said you have a new book coming out and other books, and you have short stories, but it'd be great for folks to be able to connect with you. So how do they do that?
I do have a novel coming out in September 10th called Children of Dust that will be available everywhere. And let's see, if people are interested in getting some of the anthologies that we've published, because we've published 24 just from Mount Mex, and we've published anthologies from the other campuses also. If anyone is interested in having some of these anthologies, if they'll look up the Alabama Writers Forum online, and the website is writersforum.org. If you'll go to that website, writersforum.org, then you can click on programs and you can read more about the Writing Our Stories program. And you can also click on contacts and email us or write us and let us know, how many anthologies you'd like to have. And we'll be glad to mail them to you. And my website is just marlinbarton.com.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Marlin. So as we're playing with this we've been intermittent in our success and in our implementation of our new feature.
I think I got it figured out. I really do. I've been practicing between
no
episodes.
Shade on you, Susan. You've been the one holding this whole thing together. So I have full appreciation. But Marlin, what will happen is Susan's going to share a video of a featured educator. We like just to call out the amazing work that's happening across the country and the world by educators. And then we're going to talk about them a little bit. So we'd love for you to join us for that little last bit. We're just going to be reflecting on another leader. So take it away, Susan.
All right, let's see. If I make it big, you'll have to tell me if you can hear it. All right, let's see. Is it? Oh, it's big. Okay, that's good. All right, now it's playing.
I can hear it.
Yay!
My name is Dr. Kimberly Parker. I am English faculty at the Cambridge Written Latin School, where I teach 10th and 12th grade English. It's important for students to know about Black literary traditions, particularly at Wrench, because we have so many students of African descent, but they don't know anything about the literature. So it's important that they connect to that literature, and my goal is to make them literary citizens of the world. In my school last year, I piloted a program intended to increase the number of students of color in honors English classes. In my doctoral research studies, I studied young Black men in book clubs. In both of those instances, what I realized is that when students have an opportunity to become part of a literacy community, they actually read the text. The goal of the Black Literary Society is to promote the appreciation of literature from the African diaspora. So membership is open to everyone, as long as they're supportive of the mission. We plan on meeting twice a month, and then we will have visits, hopefully, from local authors. We will go to readings around the community, and we will talk about literature from the African diaspora. When students read literature written by authors of African descent, it allows them to see themselves within the text and to imagine all kinds of possibilities.
What it's really about for Kim is making sure that every single student is able to advance as high as possible during the course of her time with them. And so what they come out with is an incredible gift, and that is the gift of access to their own minds, to their own hearts.
Educators can replicate a literary society in their own classrooms by simply reaching out to the local community. There are so many artists who are in New England who are willing to come in and talk to adolescents. And it matters because students want to connect to the real world. When writers come in and talk about their difficulties writing, their successes, it makes it real for students, and it makes what we are doing in the classroom matter even more. Being selected as a math literacy champion has allowed me to connect students to text in ways that I couldn't otherwise. It allows them to understand what it means to be humanized by literature, to meet authors, reading their works, and to understand that real people write text. You know, I'm really passionate about when kids read a text and it matters to them. So they see themselves in the text or they make some connection that makes them realize that the books exist more than just on the page. And so when those sparks happen, it's magic. But not every student has that. So if we can just have 1 or 2 moments in class for every kid, then that's what matters.
You know, that actually, I think there's a lot of really wonderful connections to what we've been talking about today, which is giving students access to their voice and helping them understand the writing process and what it is to be a writer, and how important is it to provide students with examples of people that look like them, that share their background and experiences, and are giving window into what their world looks like and is, so that kids can imagine into what their future could be as well. So that's a really wonderful.
I love this for the same reason. It did really, for me, connect with what we've been talking about today. And also this idea of being able to see yourself in the narrative, being able to see your story told and connect to it. And so it's both as a reader and as a writer. I think if we can spark the joy of both reading and writing, I think we can help our young people really be able to heal from whatever they're holding, or to weather, this idea of weathering. And I think and Oprah talks about this in the book with Bruce Perry, that folks, they would weather the trauma. But if we can help folks learn how to tell their narrative and to be able to see themselves in text, that it's more than just weathering, but it's actually transformative and healing.
One of the things, it reminded me of one of the things that we try to do at Mount Meigs is bring in visiting writers, a wide spectrum of visiting writers. And so when we're able to do this, believe me, my students love it, and they're really able to connect with the people that we bring in, and they get to listen to someone other than me. Sometimes the visiting writers will say things that I've tried to get across, and they listen to me. I think, they respond to the things that I teach them. But when they hear it from somebody else, somebody who looks more like them, it really has an impact. And so that some of the things that she said there really, really rang true.
I've added the link to this YouTube video. I've added the link to both the Facebook and the YouTube live. And if you're interested in getting a copy of the link, let us know and we'll send it to you. Just send us a message.
Thanks, Susan. Marlin, it was so wonderful to have you on the show today. I'm incredibly grateful for the work that you're doing with the youth out in Alabama. Giving folks their voice and helping people to find their voice, I think, is one of the greatest gifts we can give anyone. And for youth that are struggling, or they're in a situation where they're trying to do some reflection, I can't imagine a more powerful gift. So I'm really grateful for your work and for your time.
Yes, thank you so much, Marlin. It was a great conversation. And if you like what you heard on today's show, please like and rate us. Subscribe to The Awakening Educator. It really helps us keep going and keep bringing great guests like Marlin on to have important conversations.
Class is dismissed. Wasn't that fun? Susan and Megan are always happy to greet you on the next episode of The Awakening Educator. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Education is the foundation for a brighter future. Open your eyes to The Awakening Educator